So let me just take a minute to welcome everyone to our second Zoom club meeting. It's such a great opportunity to at least see each other, talk a little bit, enjoy that feeling we have of sharing the Princeton experience. And we have something really, really special tonight. Stan and Margie Smith are going to tell us a little bit about their high-stakes tennis careers. We're going to hear a lot about the beginning of women's athletics at Princeton as well, because Margie was absolutely instrumental in that, being the very first woman from Princeton to enter an intercollegiate athletic event. So with that, let me hand over to our two illustrious speakers, and I think we're going to have a wonderful time. Also, if everybody stays muted, we'll have some Q&A. Stan and Margie are going to make a brief presentation on some subjects, and then we'll make sure there's plenty of time to ask questions. So, all yours, Stan and Margie. I guess I'm actually supposed to kick off by asking, what brought you to Hilton Head in the first place?
Oh, except Stan and Margie have to unmute.
You guys are muted. Can
Okay.
you?
There we go.
Yay! Okay.
Here we go. We actually, I grew up in California, and Margie was going to a school in La Jolla. But Charles Frazier, who created Sea Pines Resort, realized that tennis is becoming popular. And so he wanted to get somebody in tennis to try to really kickstart the tennis program at Sea Pines Resort. And so I came from actually Fort Ord, California, when I was in basic training, and came by Sea Pines on the way to be stationed in Washington, D.C. And I fell in love with the place, like so many people do. We came to an agreement very quickly where I was a touring pro. That was in 1971, April of 1971. So next April will be 50 years as a touring pro at Sea Pines Resort. So that was what brought me to Hilton Head, and we got married about 3 years later, and that brought our whole family to Hilton Head. So when I was in California, I met this little girl that she had a great looking forehand. And so I was attracted to her, and we actually dated on her 18th birthday for the very first time. And then later, when I moved back here, I would visit Princeton, and that's how I got involved with Princeton. So Margie, take it from there.
So my Princeton connection began, well, actually, let me go back to my freshman year of college. I was at Tulane, and I had been accepted at Stanford as a transfer student. So I was planning to go there. But my father, who's a Princeton class of 31, said, you know, Princeton's gone co-ed. Why don't you think of applying there? So, and I was familiar with Princeton because my dad used to take us to reunions, and I'd march in the P’03, and I think one year I held the banner with one of my siblings. And we always loved Bill Bradley. He took me to see some of Bill Bradley's basketball games. But the connection was even before my father, because my grandfather, who you're looking at now, John Logan, was the class of 1913. He was a football player. One of his teammates was Hobie Baker, and he was on the Walter Camp All-American football team. And my mom particularly always let us know what a great job he did and how important it was to play at Princeton and be in football, playing football. And one of the stories with him that I remember that just sort of shows the passion that you have as a Princetonian, and especially for athletics, is in 1911, he, along with four of his classmates, walked to New Haven to watch the Princeton-New Haven football game, and it took him 3 days to get there. So then, you know, when it came that I had an opportunity to go and to transfer as a sophomore, I was really excited about it. And after that, I have a sister who was a class of 75, so I was a class of 73. And then she went on to coach the women's tennis team for 25 years afterwards. And then I had another sister, Nancy Gangler, class of 80, who also went there. And then together, our second son, Trevor, went there, and he was the class of '03. And actually, if you do another slide, I think I might have there. Sorry, that's a picture that Stan would come visit me at Princeton, and that was in Pine Hall. And my roommate and I painted our room pink for some reason. And then the next slide, this was actually a fun occasion. You see someone in a top hat all dressed up. In September of 1973, you had the Bobby Riggs Billie Jean match, the Battle of the Sexes, which maybe most of you remember that. But anyway, it was it was actually, people all over the world followed that. It was a man playing a woman. And anyway, so we sort of had a takeoff on that match at Princeton. And so the women's team played the men's JV varsity team. And we had several hundred people watching us. And the linesmen got all dressed up in top hats, and Stan was the umpire.
That was a mistake.
Well, the mistake was I lost the match because he kept telling my opponent to drop shot me, and that was the way to beat me. So,
I gave him a couple ideas. His name was Jeff Oakes. He was a little slow, but I had to give him some help.
Yeah, Stan was not pulling for me to win that one. But anyway, so that was, and then I think the next slide is maybe, yep, there I am. That's my 45th reunion. It's fun because our son Trevor, being '03, we share major reunions, and he's there with his 5 kids, and he now has 6. So that's my Princeton connection. And then the
How about that
white
sweater?
leather sweater. There you go. So I just finished doing a podcast with Helena Novotna, and in 1969, when Princeton decided to go co-ed, there was actually a great quote that I found from, it was the director of development at Princeton at that time, and someone came to him and said, intercollegiate athletics is surely outside the scope of women students. So,
Wow.
so the plan in 1970 was really for 5 years down the road before they were going to really have women's athletic teams. Well, in the fall of '70, Helena and I walked into the office of this Marilee Dean, who was in charge of women's sort of their physical education and athletics. And we just asked if we could play in the Eastern Intercollegiate Tennis Tournament in New Paltz, New York. And she said yes, and she went out and bought T-shirts and just sewed our names on the back, and we had like orange and black pom-poms on our socks. So we go to this tournament, and I happened to win it. And, you know, I didn't really think it was that big a deal until actually, when I realized it was a big deal, is I made faces in the crowd in Sports Illustrated. And whenever we got Sports Illustrated, I always looked at faces in the crowd. So anyway, that was the start of women's athletics. And it's the first time that a woman had represented Princeton, and I happened to be victorious. And from then on, it just took off, and we got wonderful support from the undergraduates, predominantly male. They came out to watch our matches, and it was just a great experience. And so this podcast, Helena and I did the first one, and there are going to be several, or maybe about 12 of them, that are going to be every couple of weeks going on until next year.
And of course, she went on to be the undefeated captain of the women's team, and any undefeated captain of any team gets this sweater with the P on it. So she was actually undefeated the whole time she was there at Princeton. So it was pretty special to see her evolution there at Princeton, and I'm very proud of her. That's why I have this shirt here. That I'm a class of '73, kind of an honorary member of that class.
Is this a good moment to let the audience ask a few questions about these early times that Hilton had and Margie's tennis playing?
Sure.
Anybody, you just need to unmute if you'd like to ask a question. Well, since we don't have any questions right now, we've got a lot more great material. Should we go to this clip? We have a terrific clip of Stan playing tennis to share with you.
All right.
It's match point now, and Nastasi's back is to the wall. He's done it. And there's Stan, the gracious, popular winner we won't.
So Stan, that was a clip of your win at Wimbledon. Can you tell us what that was like, and was there anything particularly memorable from that match that stayed with you over the years?
Well, the most important thing is that I didn't trip on the net when I jumped over after winning. But, you know, when I was a young boy at age 16, I had 4 goals. One was to become a member of the U.S. Davis Cup team. 2 was to become the #1 player in the United States. 3 was to win Wimbledon. And 4 was to become the #1 player in the world. And the last 2 are almost synonymous with each other because of the fact that Wimbledon's such a big event. And the thing about it was in 1971, the year before, I got to the finals and lost to John Newcomb in 5 sets, 6-4 in the 5th. And this match against Nastasi the next year, which was the first time they ever played on Sunday because of a rain delay on Saturday. And at that time, the finals were played on Saturday. So I was able to win 7-5 in the 5th against Nastasi. So it made it very special to come back the next year and win it after losing the finals. And of course, fulfilling one of those dream goals that I had as a 16-year-old.
Well, I think that you did more than fulfill those goals, Stan. I think you had an amazing career. For example, how does that Wimbledon win compare with the Davis Cup?
Well, winning Wimbledon was one of the great individual feats that you could do, obviously. But playing Davis Cup for the country would be like, you know, beating the Olympics. And each year, for about 10 years, I got to play on the Davis Cup team, and either singles and or doubles. And that was special because you're playing for the country. You know, you've got at that time maybe 250 million or 300 million people that you're playing for. Most people didn't know that you were playing for them, but it was interesting because it introduced you as Stan Smith from the United States, and they'd say game to the United States, game set and match to the United States. They'd have a flag behind. They'd play the national anthem before each match. And so it was a special honor to be able to play for the country. And the pressure was really interesting because you're playing for the guys on the team because we traveled together, especially in 1972. We played 6 matches all outside the United States. And so we were supporting each other during tournaments as well, of course, during those Davis Cup matches. And so it was very special to be able to win the match and to win the Davis Cup. And then we won it 5 years in a row, actually, at one point. So to retain the Davis Cup was very special. So that was, and also some of the circumstances we were in were very difficult. They weren't just normal tournaments where everybody was fairly neutral. When you're playing for your country in another country, especially places like Spain, Romania, Mexico, Chile, places like that, the fans were 95% against you, and they weren't always polite. And so you had to be able to handle the pressure of not only the fans, but sometimes the linesmen were related to the players, I think, or the umpire was not able to speak English all of a sudden. And we had some controversy. One time in Spain, a guy was reflecting the sun in my eyes from the other side of the court, and I said something to the umpire and to the neutral referee, and they didn't do anything. So I hit my serve a little bit long that went almost to the 6th row where this mirror was, and That was a bad mistake because they threw all their cushions on the court. And we had to wait for about 30 minutes to clean the court off. And in Romania or in Spain, we had a death threat on our captain's life. That was in Chile. The mirror was in Spain. And of course, the biggest one was playing against Romania, Nastasian Tiriac in Romania. And that was a whole nother story. But anyway, it was fun to win those matches for the United States, not just for an individual.
Well, and speaking of the U.S., you also won the U.S. Open, Stan. This is another great event.
Yeah, the U.S. Open was, I'll tell you a little story about the U.S. Open. First of all, this is the trophy that you got when you win the U.S. Open. If I hold it really close to the camera, it really looks big, but it's not very big. This is a replica of what you got when you won the U.S. Open. But that was interesting because, of course, it was our own national championship, and it was just when the tiebreakers came into play. So I had to play 7 tiebreakers throughout that tournament, 9-point tiebreakers, which were like Russian roulette in a way because it was so quick. But we played, again, I had a rain delay. I had to play the semifinals on Tuesday instead of Saturday. It was delayed 3 days. And then the finals on Wednesday, and we almost didn't finish that. I was in the doubles final as well. And so we had to play a tiebreaker for the title instead of a 5th set because it was getting dark. So anyway, I played Jan Kodesh in the finals, and it was a special moment to be able to win our national championship.
And then you didn't get a trophy then.
And then I didn't get a trophy. I didn't get that trophy at the time, actually. I got a gold ball. There's a couple here in the cabinet, and a check for $20,000. This year, I think the winner got $3 million. Last year, the winner got $3.5 million. So it was a little different prize money at that time than it is today.
So the prize money may be different, but do you think the ingredients of a tennis champion are the same, Stan?
Well, that's a very good point, Lisa, because the great players have some special ingredients, and a lot of it has to do with the mental side of the game. You've got to be able to handle the pressure, which inevitably takes place, whether it's the finals or anywhere during the tournament itself. You have to win 7 matches, and so you have to be consistent enough to play at a high level for 7 matches. And you have to be able to handle the ups and the downs of the situation. In the Grand Slam events, you play best of 5 sets, and so you might lose the first 2 sets, and then you have to come back and win 3 sets in a row, which is always tough. So you have to be mentally fit, you have to be physically fit, you have to be able to change your game plan if the one you're using is not working. So you have to have game plan A, you may have to go to B, you may have to go to C, and then sometimes you just have to hang in there and just guts it out and fight as hard as you can until the last point is played.
But I think I'll just interject something because, I mean, Stan did all that on his own. There wasn't the entourages that you have now. I mean, when anybody wins, they always thank their team. And that might be, their trainer and the nutritionist and their psychiatrist that travel with them. And it was, it was a one-man show.
Yeah, if you split sets, you go to the locker room during a rain delay, you'd have to look in the mirror and say, okay, what should I do? And then hopefully the person in the mirror would give you a good answer to come back and change your game plan if it wasn't working.
Great. So, Stan, having described all of the things you need to win, what do you think separates the good from the great players?
Well, you look at the 3 great players that are playing today, Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. They have something that they have a commitment to get as much out of the game as they possibly can. They have the ability to handle the pressure. They have the ability to change if they need to. And they compete unbelievably well. Nadal, has won the French championships 13 times, which is mind-boggling. You can't even imagine that. To win it once is unbelievable. Borg won it 6 times. I thought he was the greatest clay court player that would ever live. And then with Nadal doing this, and then him winning on grass as well, on hard courts at the Australian as well as at the U.S. Open, it's very special. And so they have a commitment that they're gonna get as much out of their abilities as they possibly can, and they love to compete and fight when it gets tough. They like to embrace the difficulty of the situation, and that's what really separates them. They figure out how to win when they're not playing their best, and inevitably you're going to be playing subpar at some point of time, particularly in a Grand Slam event.
The three current, am I back on?
Yeah, go ahead.
You just mentioned the three great modern players. Do you want to make any comments about the state of tennis today, besides the fact that the prize money is so exceptionally high now?
Well, you know, the game is the second most international game in the world after soccer. What we call in the United States is called football in other parts of the world. But that's where most players want to play. They want to play on the football team or play soccer, you know, in Europe particularly, or in Asia. So, you know, we need to get, in America, we need to get more of our great athletes who play basketball, football, baseball, track and field, soccer, and all these other sports to play tennis, to get the great athletes playing. But worldwide, the sport is doing quite well. Even in the pandemic, you're seeing some great tournaments being held at the US Open, French Championships. Wimbledon wasn't played this year. The Australian was played. But for the average person, the everyday player, recreational player, actually tennis has been on the rise because it's one of the great sports you can play during the pandemic. Golf and tennis have been relatively safe to play. So you're seeing sales of tennis balls, tennis rackets, people playing tennis on the courts, public courts and club courts. And so tennis has actually been very popular in this last, 7 or 8, 9 months.
And now there's a big tournament going on next week.
Yeah, there's a tournament. The big tournament now is the Masters. It was the Masters. I actually did a few things today with the draw for next week's tournament, which is the NITO ATP Finals. And the first ATP Finals was called the Masters, and I won that tournament back in 1970. Here's the trophy I got. It's called the Masters of Tennis, and I got that trophy and $15,000 by winning that tournament, the year-end event. And that was the first year they did it, and they've been doing it ever since. And they've been holding it in London, at the O2 Arena, for the last 12 years. Prior to that, they held it in Madison Square Garden for 13 years. And next year, they're going to hold it in Turin, Italy. So next week, they had it. This year, they have 2 groups of 4 players. And one group is going to be called the Tokyo 1970 group. And the other group is the London 2020 group. And so that's why they had me on to help with the draw, because I won the tournament in 1970.
So Stan, do you ever think you'll play competitively like that again? Is there a tournament that's just right for you?
Sure, yeah. If somebody puts up enough prize money, I'll come out of retirement and play. Today's prize money is luring to the young players, and certainly the older players would love to be playing for that prize money. But I have no regrets at all for the time I played, because just prior to me playing pro tennis, tennis became open in 1968. Players were amateurs, and all they would get would be a cup, a trophy, and a warm handshake. But in 1968, tennis became open, and we started getting prize money. It wasn't as much as today, but it was certainly better than just a warm handshake.
That's great. How about the Hall of Fame, since we've been looking back just a little bit? Any comments on what's happening with that?
Well, the Hall of Fame, I became president of the Hall of Fame 9 years ago. And one of the responsibilities that I have is to help with the whole induction of players and contributors into the Hall of Fame. And this year we didn't have the induction because of the COVID, in which Ivan Izovich and Conchita Martinez were supposed to be inducted. And so that the induction takes place in Newport, Rhode Island, where the International Tennis Hall of Fame is, and the museum which is the most spectacular museum that has memorabilia and stories and even interactive displays it's called the Newport Casino, and that's where the Hall of Fame Museum is. And so if you have an interest in that and you're in Newport, Rhode Island, you should definitely go and see that. But what we did this year is we have 5 players and we have 2 contributors, and we changed the contributor category to being able to have a group instead of just an individual. So this year on the ballot, which is just being sent out next week, the ballots can include Leighton Hewitt, Juan Carlos Ferrero, Lisa Raymond, Johannes Bjorkman, and Sergio Bruguera. And on the screen is one of the contributors. This is a group here, and this is the original 9. And these ladies in 1970, signed an agreement for $1. They're holding up a dollar. And Billie Jean King is the most prominent of those players, along with Nancy Ritchie next to her, and Rosie Casals was in front of her. Those 3 have been inducted in the Hall of Fame as individuals, but these ladies, plus the lady with the sunglasses, who kind of led the group, they decided to start women's professional tennis, and they signed a contract for $1 to play. And they're on the ballot along with Dennis Vandermeer, and he's a local guy. He's started the PTR group, and he's been on Hilton Head almost as long as I have. And there's another girl in that group in that photograph named Carrie Melville Reed, and she has been living on Hilton Head for the last 30 years with Raz Reed, and she was one of the original 9. She was in the top 10 in the world for 10 years. So she was a great player, and she's been living here on Hilton Head. And I think that the original 9 and Dennis Vandermeer will be voted into the Hall of Fame this year to be inducted next summer. Hopefully the event will take place, the tournament as well as the induction ceremony will take place, and get them a chance to be inducted.
And I hope we have a big celebration planned for Hilton Head, since we have so many of the principals here.
Well, we should celebrate for Dennis as well as for Carrie, and
Yeah, that would be fun.
that it's going to be a special moment in their lives.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
May I ask a question?
sure.
It's a good time for Q&A for anyone now.
Years ago, my brother-in-law, Robbie Robertson, was very active in tennis up in Newport, the casino. And I remember something about a change in the scoring rules. It was very controversial at that time. It was the Van Allen silly scoring system.
Yeah, no, it's the Van Allen simplified scoring system. It was called VAS. And in fact,
they called it silly for some reason. I don't know.
Mr. Van Allen was one of the. He looks like the absent-minded professor, and he had us doing not only that scoring, but he had us, let's say, serving 1 yard behind the baseline, or we had to serve and wait for the ball to bounce before we came to the net, and we did all sorts of silly things that Mr. Van Allen had us do. And as the time was sort of an amateur tournament, and we did these different things. But that Van Allen simplified scoring system, VAS, became the tiebreaker, and that's what was the tiebreaker, the 9-point tiebreaker when I won the U.S. Open that we were using. So that all started with that Van Allen, who was the great professor.
Yeah, he was an Astor, wasn't he?
Yes.
Van Allen and the Astors were related. Yeah,
he was. He was responsible for starting that whole for the International Tennis Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Well, this was a long time ago, right?
A long time ago. This was back in the 50s. 54 was when it was started, actually.
The Hall of Fame.
Well, I'm class of 53 at Princeton, so I'm about 20 years ahead of you guys. 53. Well, you got 53, 73, and our son is 03. So we got the major reunion there. And Mary here, she has her own separate claim to fame. She's a Hoosier from Indiana who went to Northwestern, but her cousin, Nancy Kriplin, wrote this book. I don't know if you can see it. It's called Dwight Davis, The Man and the Cup,
Oh,
which you can get on Amazon.
That's
Nancy
great.
wrote some years ago. She writes in that genre. She writes about people who became well known for doing something. I think she's written about other cups as well. But anyway, I thought you'd be amused at that. And
Well,
as for me, in 1949, when I was trying to figure out where to go to college, lived in New Jersey. My dad was class of 25 at Dartmouth. And so, but here I was in New Jersey. I didn't really feel like going up to the wilds of New Hampshire. So I decided I'm going to go to Princeton. So I just wrote a letter, or I just signed up, and it was as simple as that. I mean, in 1949, there wasn't any question about it. But my father, his reaction was that I had raised the standard of both Princeton and Dartmouth by making that decision.
That's great. I did a Zoom party last week with the Northwestern alums. There was about 30 on there, and 3 of them were past USTA presidents. And I know that Princeton's had at least one USTA president over the years. And so Northwestern's been a great contributor to tennis from their alums.
So, well,
I think we have another question now.
I think Richard had a question.
Okay.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. There's a point, Stan, you alluded to earlier that I'm really curious about. You mentioned the conversion to the open era, and what was it, about a year ago, speaking of Princeton, I read John McPhee's Levels of the Game, where he's profiling the match with Arthur Ashe in New York. And since you really started your career right as that started, and I mean, I know that it's some years ago now, but at that time, how do you think that maybe you had to reconsider, if you had to reconsider, how you played, or how the tennis world played? When I read the book, I got the implication that there were, let's just say, some of the established rhythms got very much upended. At least that was the impression that I got from reading McPhee's book. So I'm curious about your experience with that, right as you start, that the tennis world really flips on its head.
Well, John McPhee was actually part of our romance. One time I was going to Princeton to date Margie. I was trying to, I was giving the sales pitch. And John McPhee set me up with playing tennis with one of the tennis players in the team, playing squash with a player that at that time was #1 in the country from Princeton, and also playing basketball. So I played those 3 sports and squeezed in a dinner, I think, with Margie during that time. But John McPhee loved my racket, the Stan Smith Wilson racket. And so we would do a trade, because he interviewed me several times for that book on Arthur and Clark Gravener. So I would give him one of my rackets, which had a pretty big handle, which was unusual for anybody else liking it. He would use my racket, and I would get one of his books. And so we had that deal going for several years. And he did a great job in that book. But that really was when tennis changed. That was in '68. That book was around '68 when Arthur won the first U.S. Open. And then from that point forward, tennis really grew like crazy. It was very popular with celebrities and actors and actresses and politicians. And so we got a lot of people supporting the game, and it grew very quickly. And I remember one time I was actually on TV, one time live. I mean, at the same time, I was on live, plus I was on 3 tape programs. And so I was on like 4 programs at one time on one Sunday. So tennis grew quickly, after '68, when we got into the '70s. And then, of course, we've had, tremendous growth over the years because of television, and then also because of sponsors and the fans.
I think
I remember John. He was a classmate of mine. Uh, John McPhee was a classmate of mine. His dad was a doctor at the time at Princeton. He was the doctor in charge of the infirmary there.
Really?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah. And John and I were.
we have another question.
Oh, hi, Stan and Margie. It's Cindy. I have a question about the modern era. I am a big fan of Serena Williams, and I am not alone, I think, in hoping she's finally going to clinch that next major title. But I'm wondering, do you think, is her mental block too big, and is the next generation of players coming up too strong to believe that that's realistic at this point?
Well, that's a great question. It leads me to a comment I have to make before I answer that question. Is we have the best collegiate coach who's ever coached on this call tonight, in Dick Gould. He coached at Stanford, won 17 NCAA titles. And talking about the modern era, he coached John McEnroe, Roscoe Tanner, a lot of the great players who played in the last 20, 30 years. And he just retired from being involved with Stanford, but he's in his retirement, he's doing so much for people in general, particularly in Northern Cal, that it's amazing. So he's very special. He's on this call tonight. But as far as Serena, she is certainly going to stop playing here at some point. She and Roger Federer, 39 years old, and Venus is 42 years old. She's still playing, and they are a great story. Those two young ladies. And they came from a place right near where I grew up in Southern California, in Compton, and have had to fight through in a very white sport. Arthur Ashe certainly, helped grow the sport for African Americans. Althea Gibson was the first one to pioneer that did that in the women's game, and so Serena and Venus have had to make it through this very difficult sport worldwide. And they have been great representatives of the United States, playing Fed Cup, and of course, winning all these Grand Slam events. And their record is crazy good. I mean, Serena is trying to go for the 24th major.
Do you think she'll do it?
And I don't know if she can do it. She Australia certainly is a tournament where she's played very well in the past, and hopefully she could win it in Australia. But she's been in the finals twice now after she's gotten to the 23rd major and after she's had a child. And so it gets tougher every single time. So with this whole COVID thing, it could be a good thing for her, it could be a bad thing for her, preparing for the Australian Open, which is going to take place with hopefully some fans, maybe 50% the fans that they normally have. But that is a place, if she can really get ready, maybe that's the time that she can win the 24th and tie Margaret Court, who was, she played about my time, a little bit before me. And during that time, I actually got to play mixed doubles with her twice, and with Margaret Court. And her name was Margaret Smith before she became Margaret Smith Court. And so that was one of the reasons why she was a good player.
I think we have a couple more questions. Did I see maybe
Larry and Sue
Brown?
Brown? Yeah.
And Sue also wanted.
Yeah, thanks you guys. Stan, Margie, thanks so much for doing this. It's really a pleasure to hear from you. So coincidentally, we're part of the Northern California contingent on this call. I happen to be with my wife Sue here, who's Dick Gould's daughter.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Class of 82. She played on the women's team her freshman year, just a few years after Margie. But Stan, if I remember right, I grew up watching you at some of the grass tennis tournaments when the U.S. Open was first played on grass. I lived on the main line outside Philadelphia, and if I remember right, watched you at the Pennsylvania State Lawn Tennis Championships at Marion Cricket Club. So I'm wondering if maybe you have a favorite story from those earlier days when the crowds were smaller but very enthusiastic, and what was it like to play with, the fans so close to you, and on grass and private clubs like that leading up to the Open back in the day?
Well, the major tournaments were held on grass. So it was the U.S. Open, so on grass, the Australian and Wimbledon, of course, and the other one is on clay at Roland Garros. And so leading up from before Wimbledon to all the tournaments between Wimbledon and the U.S. Open, leading up to the U.S. Open, were on grass. And so we played a lot on grass, and they were played at clubs. And you mentioned the Marion Cricket Club. That was one of the clubs where Margie and I had one of our first dates, because at that time, the men and the women played together. And so we would play in Boston and New York and Philadelphia. And so we actually got a chance to have a date.
Wait a minute. Marion, I think it was one tournament that you either lost first round and you left. I was still in the tournament and you didn't watch me.
Well, is that when you played Margaret Court?
That's right, I played Margaret Court. Yeah.
Margie played Margaret Court and gave Margaret Court a lesson, but maybe for one game. But,
no, I think I won 3 games.
You won 3
but
games.
You weren't there watching, but I've forgiven him.
It wasn't.
This is a good time to change the subject.
Yeah, let's talk about grass court tennis. Anyway, it was.
You won a car?
Actually, I played in New Jersey, and I won the first car that was ever given as a prize, a Renault. They were trying to get into the U.S. market, and they gave a Renault for the winner. I beat Clark Gravener, I think, in the finals, or maybe Arthur Ashe. And they brought the car on the court, and I drove the car off and knocked down part of the temporary stands as I drove off. And, that was a great moment. But it wasn't just basic, clubs that we played in.
And we stayed with
Was
family.
that, by any chance, was that the Orange Lawn Tennis Club?
Yeah.
Absolutely, the Orange Lawn Tennis Club.
My great-grandfather founded it.
You're kidding.
In the Oranges, yep.
Really?
Okay. So we promised all of you, I know that we could talk with Stan and Margie about the tennis all night, but we did promise you a look at some high fashion shoes. And I think we've got a great clip, and then Stan's going to maybe answer a few questions after that about the shoe business.
Bouncing into our hearts in 1972 and dominating on and off the court ever since, we bring you the man behind the shoe, Stan Smith. Clean, white, classy, pure, simple, leathery. Stan Smith, the man, the sneaker, the legend.
So Stan, your name is now synonymous around the world with Adidas shoes. I think you're going to tell us a little bit about your book and the fact that some people don't know that you are a person, that there is actually a person behind the shoe. Can you tell us how this happened?
Well, the first leather shoe ever made was the Robert Hayet Adidas shoe. And before that, we wore canvas shoes. Dick will remember that. A lot of us wore Converse shoes. And so to have a leather shoe was pretty neat. And that started in 1965. In 1971, Adidas realized they wanted to get a little stronger presence in the United States. They'd been selling the shoe, but it wasn't selling as well as they'd like. And so they looked for an American. And I was an American, and I was number one in the world. So we made an agreement, and I thought it might last 5 years, where my picture would be on the shoe. Robert Hayet's name would stay on the shoe for a few years. And then we had a lot of different iterations of my name in different places and Robert's name. And finally, they took his name off the shoe. And as they say, the rest is history. But in 2012, the shoe was not selling well, actually in 2011. So Adidas, we had a meeting every year at Wimbledon, and they said, we're going to take the shoe off the market and bring it back in 2014. Well, we walked out of the meeting, Margie and I and my agent, saying, well, it's been a good run, 30 or 40 years, but I doubt anything will come out of it. But in 2014, purely through social media, Adidas came out and relaunched the shoe. And they relaunched it to the market of ages 18 to 25. And when they told me that that was the market, I said, that is stupid. No one's going to know who I am at that age. And sure enough, they did it with a lot of celebrities and hip hop artists and singers and models and that sort of thing, even those that I didn't even know. In fact, when I was at home one day, our daughter Austin came in to the room and said, Dad, you're famous. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, Jay-Z has you in one of his songs. I said, that's great. Who's Jay-Z? So, I wasn't too hip at the time, but a lot of the people that were buying the shoe certainly knew who Jay-Z was, and a lot of others that were wearing the shoe and promoting the shoe. And so it's been a fun run. We've had some different shoes. I have a shoe here that's kind of interesting. This is a shoe made by a graffiti artist from Athens, Greece. And he made this shoe for me, kind of a one-off. The shoe is so wide and plain, it's like a canvas. And so you can do things like this. In Amsterdam, I got a clog. It looked just like my shoe. So it was about my size as well, pretty big. Pharrell Williams is one of those young guys that helped promote the shoe. He designed this shoe here. So you could see it's the same profile shoe, but with different materials, different designs, and different patterns. And the shoe has actually last year they just sold the 100 millionth pair of shoes. So it's gone pretty well.
So you've mentioned some of these celebrities. Do you occasionally run into celebrities who are wearing your shoe, or run into celebrities who are happy to meet you because of your shoe?
Well, one of the celebrities that really kicked it off was Phoebe Philo. She not only designed clothes and encouraged the shoe, but she actually came out on the runway herself wearing the shoe. And that was maybe the thing that really helped kick it out the most, with fashion. And so the shoe in the last 20 years has become a fashion shoe and not a performance shoe, which it was when I first started wearing it. In fact, I have a great story with Margie's sister, who went to Princeton, now lives in London. And her daughter was in a PE class, and the PE instructor was giving a class, and her daughter came in with wearing my shoes. And the PE instructor said, you can't wear those for PE. And she said, well, why not? Says, they're fashion shoes. They're not PE shoes. They're not, they call them trainers in London. And she said, well, my uncle won Wimbledon wearing those shoes. Well, certainly you should be able to wear them in PE. But I did a book tour with, this new book that I wrote called Stan Smith, Some People Think I'm a Shoe. And actually most people do. And so this is the book. This is the cover. We put a kind of an older shoe, because the shoe's been around for a while, on the cover. And it weighs about 5 pounds. It's like 400 pages of photographs and stories about my career and stories about the shoe. But during one of the stops in London, I did a shoe signing with Stella McCartney. And Stella has been working with Adidas for a number of years, and she designed a vegan shoe where her right shoe had her picture on the tongue, and the left shoe has my picture on the tongue. And so we signed shoes for about 2 hours. And she leaned over at one point and said, I'm getting pretty good at signing shoes. I said, yeah, you are. You haven't done it as much as I have, but you're doing a great job. At the end of the evening, she had a special guest come in, and this lady put her foot on the table. She said, sign my shoe. And I said, well, Madonna, that's not the right shoe. My picture's on the other shoe. So Madonna put her foot on the other table, on the table with the other foot, and I signed that shoe. So I had Madonna sign a shoe for me as well as Stella. And then, of course, Pharrell Williams has been great. He wrote the foreword to my book, and we've done a few promotional things together. And he's a great guy who's performed in front of a lot more people than just, let's say 20,000. He performs in front of 100,000 a lot of times when he's performing. But it's been fun.
But I think what's most fun with the shoe is just so everybody from all walks of life enjoy it. I mean, you see like grandparents wearing it, you see their, their little kids, and, people of all different races, that it's really been interesting, and it's been fun. And most time people have good things to say about it. So
and I hope it's a uniting factor worldwide that everybody kind of likes. And my favorite thing is to have a mother and a daughter wearing the shoes. And because most daughters wouldn't be caught dead wearing the same thing their mother's wearing. But hopefully, Cindy, you can wear that shoe as well as Lisa, and feel good about it.
We're fighting over the Stan Smiths in my closet.
It's true.
Okay.
I have some black glittery ones. Margie's seen them.
yes, and we have Stan's closet, I think.
Speaking of which, are there some special edition shoes that are only available in limited places or for special events?
Well, these shoes that I just showed you are kind of one-offs. I mean, the ones that Pharrell helped design are available in the store. They were, but they bring out these limited edition shoes all the time, and so they're out for a short period of time, and then hopefully they're sold and they move on to something else. And so that's part of their strategy.
And actually, for Tokyo this year, they had on which I don't know if they'll use them next year at the Olympics, but on the tongue they had Stan eating sushi.
Yeah, that was for the Japanese market.
That was the market there.
They're pretty creative.
Yeah,
Sometimes I wonder, but they have done some pretty ingenious things that I certainly cannot criticize.
Okay, so here's the big question. Who has more shoes? Margie or Stan? Which one?
I think that's Stan's closet.
My daughter Logan just came over from Savannah, and she helped me organize my closet, and this is what it turned out to look like at the end. So it's a few people think I should have a pair of every style that they've come out with, but that would be a bit too many. But this is a closet that you can see there's some boots at the very top, and there's some others that are different colors and different patterns and different materials.
Yeah, and some say Stan on it in the back.
Yeah, that black one in the bottom there, it says Stan on one shoe and Smith on the other shoe. So that's another unique. This is the one for the Olympics that's next to the Stan Smith shoes that has that one is, I think, either bronze or silver. So.
But it's been fun.
They award these instead of medals at the Olympics. Is that the idea?
They were going to award those along with the medals, I think. If you won the gold medal, you get the gold back of the shoe. And I don't think the Nike people would enjoy that too much, but hopefully the Adidas people would.
Great. Okay. Anything else, Stan or Margie, that you'd like to add that we haven't covered? It's
a shout out to some people there, and Kelsey. And
Kelsey, yeah, well,
I've hi from.
It's been fun for me to get to know the Princeton traditions. I know you're going to have a tradition here at the very end of this thing, but for us to have our son go to Princeton after Margie there, in fact, he did an article. Probably he was the first one, a male that had a mother that was a Princeton grad. So that was pretty neat. And he actually, the story about that is he could have gone to Duke, where our son Ramsey went, and he was offered a scholarship there. And of course, at Princeton, there's no scholarships unless it's financial need. And so we had told all of our kids that the education was the most important thing from our point of view. And we would help them go to any college they would like to go to. And that was probably a mistake. But he came up to me one time. He said, "Dad, did you really mean what you said?" I said, "Yeah, I do. And, if you can get this partial scholarship at Duke and be there with your brother for 2 years, they've got a great tennis program, not as good as Stanford, but, that it would be a great experience for you. And you'd be together." He said, "Well, I want to go to Princeton." And of course, it was pretty hard for me to say that wasn't a good idea, although financially he was old enough to know that could be, an effective argument for me to make. But he really flourished there because he wasn't under the shadow of his brother, who was maybe a little bit better player at the time. And he ended up playing number 4 on the team, and then 5 or 3. And then by the end, I think he played 1 or 2. And it was very special for him to play and represent Princeton, being a captain as well on the team. And he never did get the white, sweater for being an undefeated captain like his mother did. But he did get to be there while his aunt was the captain of the team, was the coach of the women's team for 25 years, Louise. So she kept an eye on him while he was there and kept him out of trouble most of the time. And so that was special too. So the whole relationship with Margie's grandfather and her father, and then with our son and with her sisters, and the opportunity that I had to go there to see what a great campus it was special for me. And certainly I know Margie would certainly have the last word on that.
Yeah. Go Princeton, go Tigers.
That sounds like a great cue to maybe think about the singing of Old Nassau. First, I want to again thank Stan and Margie for their generous gift of their time, for the wonderful stories, for everything that you've shared with us today. I'd also like to thank Cindy Drakeman. I don't know if you guys have noticed, our communications look pretty sharp these days. Cindy has been working very hard on those, and she's organized Zoom, which she knows a lot about, so thanks to her. So with that, I think we've got a recording of Old Nassau that we're hoping to share with everybody. You can sing along. Cindy and I will not sing because I think that will create feedback here.
That's our excuse anyway.
Yeah.
And thank you, Lisa and Cindy.
Thank you, Lisa and Cindy.
So
great
much.
job for putting this together.
Thanks to everybody for coming. It's just so great to see you, even if it's through Zoom. We really like that.